This is Don Drysdale. There have been a lot of different contributions to the development of sports in the United States, and most of them have been by men or women who become well-known stars or coaches. Today, I'll tell you about the gift of a Yonkers butcher named John Schatz. This program is brought to you as a public service of this station and your local Army representative. Today's Army will teach you a skill with a lifetime of rewards. Now our story and the unselfish contribution of a butcher from Yonkers. It was 1888. The butcher, John Schatz, was a fun-loving businessman in Yonkers, New York. As a young man, he had loved to run races with his friends, and he was known as the fastest man on foot in the state of New York. But as he grew older and slower, he began to look for other ways to participate in athletics. Finally, a friend of his introduced him to a brand new game, one that he played for life. The game was golf. Although it had been played in America since colonial times, it wasn't very well known. In fact, except for a few immigrants from England and Scotland, the game was really unknown. One of the butcher's friends, John Reed, used to stop by the meat shop and try to convince him to come out and play a couple of rounds. Schatz would always put him off. Finally, on a warm summer afternoon when business was slow, he closed his butcher shop and went out for a lesson. By the end of the afternoon, he was hooked. The butcher had a natural feel for the game and was ready to play. Soon, he was introduced to another golfer, Robert Lockhart. Both Reed and Lockhart were Scotsmen who had learned the game before coming to America. It was Lockhart who had bought the equipment that the three men now shared. You see, he had gone home for a holiday, and while there, his interest in golf had been rekindled, so he bought a dozen gut balls and 6 clubs. A driver, a brassy, a spoon, a cleek, and sand iron, and a putter. There was no bag, and the players just carried their clubs over their shoulders the way the butcher carried a side of beef. Well, the butcher loved the game, and soon they enlisted another friend to play the game, and a foursome was formed. Playing was quite a problem, though, when you realized that there were no golf courses in the United States at the time. The 4 men used to sneak out to the city park in the early morning and quickly set up a makeshift course. They brought their own markers, which looked a lot like the little reflectors that are now implanted along our highways. Making sure that they weren't being watched, they'd quickly dig up 4, 5, or 6 holes in the lawn and begin their game. But one day, they were caught, and that's the day the butcher from Yonkers came through. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. First, here's something interesting from today's Army. Many songs have been written about being in Europe during spring. The only problem has been getting there. Well, today's Army needs young men and women to live and work in Europe. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. So sing your own song in Europe this spring. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. It was 6 a.m., July 12, 1888. The Yonkers butcher, John Schatz, and 3 of his friends had crept out into the city park. As they began to dig a hole in the lawn for their golf game, a gardener shouted at him, "Hey, you, what do you think you're doing?" The 4 men ran off as fast as they could, laughing like little children. They didn't get any golf that day, but they did meet for dinner. John Reed said, "This situation is ridiculous. We're going to be arrested if we don't find a place to play," and the butcher agreed. "But no one is going to give us a park just for the 4 of us to play." "That's true," said Reed, "so let's form a club and build our own golf course." Jumping to his feet, the butcher exclaimed, "And we'll build it right here, in the apple orchard." And so they did. On a smooth, level piece of ground very near the butcher's house, the 4 men laid out America's first golf course. It took them less than a day, and it had 6 holes. The butcher had 30 acres, and he never charged a nickel's rent. That little club grew and prospered. Eventually, it moved to a new home. But that club is still in existence today. It's the oldest golf club in the United States, St. Andrews of Yonkers, New York. Oh, yes, there's also one other innovation the 4 men came up with. Today, we call it the 19th hole. In 1888, they called it the 7th. Then and now, it's the popular place to stop for a drink after a round of golf. But in those days, it was a drink of water from the butcher's well. This is Don Drysdale, and remember, all is well in today's Army. See your local Army representative soon, and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. One of the greatest things about a career in sports is the challenge to overcome the odds. There's nothing better than proving to yourself that you're capable of doing what other people aren't. Today, I'll tell you about some extraordinary odds against a swimmer. And just one of them was the fact that this great water sports star was also allergic to chlorine. This program is presented as a public service of this station and your local Army recruiter. Get the facts on today's Army soon. You can serve your country and yourself with a career that's out of the ordinary in today's Army. Now our story. It's about a thin little girl in Australia named Dawn Fraser. She was born in 1938 in Melbourne. The day that she was born, the doctor knew that this little girl would never be normal. She suffered complications. Her respiratory system was not properly developed, and he was right. As little Dawn grew up, she suffered from a variety of chest ailments. She had bronchitis and asthma. This sickly little girl seemed to be a far cry from a champion athlete. Her parents would have been happy just to have her grow up to be healthy. No one gave competitive sports a thought, but Dawn surprised everyone. She may have been sickly, but she had spunk. The doctor suggested that teaching her to swim might build her chest strength. Her parents immediately sent her off for lessons, and Dawn loved them. By the time that she was 4 years old, she was swimming like a fish. When she was 5, her brother asked her parents if she could dive with him in an act that he was trying to form. They said no, but Dawn wanted to. She stormed about the house as mad as any 5-year-old could be. Her little fist pounded on her daddy's chest as she shouted, "I want to dive, I want to dive," over and over again. Finally, her father gave in, and the next day she and her brother started practicing for his act. Finally, they were ready. They climbed 40 feet to a tiny platform high above the water. Then the little girl climbed up on her brother's back and held him tightly around the neck. Then as the drums roared, the two plunged off the platform towards the water below. As they hit the water, she let go and swam back to the side of the pool, ready to go again. They climbed out together, and for the first time in her life, Dawn heard applause for an aquatic performance. No one would ever have to convince her to go in the water again. She and her brother performed many times from the high dive platform at Elkington Baths before she found her way onto the high school swim team. And that's when history was made, and I'll tell you about that in just a moment. First, here's important news from today's Army. The Army travels on its stomach. This saying is as true today as it was 200 years ago when our nation and the United States Army were just getting started. Today's Army needs cooks. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. Help today's Army travel. Join the people who feed the Army. Now back to our story. It's about a sickly little girl from Australia who was introduced to swimming because she was in poor health and suffered from asthma and bronchitis. In high school, she quickly made the swim team, and in 1956, at the age of 18, she entered the Olympics, which were being held in Australia. There she won a gold medal in the 100-meter freestyle, smashing the old world's record. When she climbed out of the pool, she was covered with red blotches, caused by her nervousness and the chlorine in the water. Well, that didn't stop her from coming back, though. She won another gold medal in Rome in 1960 and again in Tokyo in 1964. At the age of 25, Dawn capped her career with a record-shattering swim that no one ever thought a woman would make. It was proof that red blotches don't slow you down, because that day, Dawn Fraser broke the 1-minute mark for the 100-meter freestyle. Like the 4-minute mile, it was a psychological barrier that seemed impossible. Yet, Dawn knifed through the water in an incredible 58.9 seconds, and during her 12 years as a competitive swimmer, Dawn Fraser set 40 world's records. In 1964, doctors ordered her to retire after an auto accident put her in the hospital for weeks with neck and back braces. Instead, she came back, and she won a gold medal. She couldn't quit, but then champions never do. This is Don Drysdale. Today's Army isn't about to quit either. They're still offering training that will make you an award winner in the specialty of your choice. See your local recruiter soon and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. Outstanding athletes use a variety of different methods to sharpen their skills. Today, I'll tell you about one that got better by accident. This program is brought to you by the station as a public service on behalf of your local Army representative. Today's Army will teach you job skills in a demanding and rewarding specialty. For the details, see your Army recruiter. Now, today's story. It's about a great natural athlete, Marion Ladwig. She was born in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Her father was a policeman. When she was a little girl, she was known as the best all-round athlete of her school. She loved sports and the challenge of competition. Marion was a good runner. Wherever there was intramural competition, Marion chose to run for her class. She was a champion sprinter, you know, and most athletes are good at more than one sport. And Marion was no exception. She learned to play baseball, and soon she was the regular first baseman on the boys' team. It was years before she left baseball for another sport. She was a terror on the diamond, too. Her natural eye made her a dangerous batter, and although she wasn't strong enough to hit for extra bases very often, her flashing speed made her a treacherous base runner. Defensively, she was a whiz. But it's difficult for girls to make a living playing baseball, and when she graduated from school, she had to find a job. So she got a job as a cashier in the Grand Rapids Bowling Center. The owner told her, "Marion, you should practice whenever you can. You've got great form. You can make some money as a professional bowler." That came as a surprise to her. The first time she tried the game, she couldn't break 100. In bowling, a perfect game is 300. Outstanding bowlers score over 200 regularly. Marion thought it seemed like a good idea, and she never had a better chance to practice for free. Little by little, she raised her score. She had a fantastic backswing and great power. When she released the ball, it sped down the alley as though it had been shot out of a gun. Pins went flying all over the place. Her game got better and better as the years went by, and finally, she was averaging around 190 a game. Now, that's good bowling, but it's not championship bowling. Marion was crowding 30. It seemed as though her game had leveled off, and after bowling for 9 years, she had improved as much as possible. She won an occasional tournament in Grand Rapids, but any time she went into a regional competition, she was eliminated early. It looked as though that, well, she'd have to content herself with being a good local bowler and friendly cashier. Then, after she had been in the bowling alley for 9 years, something happened that she didn't like and didn't want. But it took her into the Bowling Hall of Fame. And I'll tell you about it in just a moment. First, here's a great idea from today's Army. Some people claim that they can build boys into men. Well, today's Army needs men for jobs boys can't handle. Armor, infantry, or artillery. Tough jobs that test your stamina, strain your muscles, work your mind. Try on a man's job in Army Combat Arms. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. It's about Marion Ladwig, a cashier in a Grand Rapids bowling alley. She loved to bowl, but couldn't really get her game together. Not until a cold winter night in 1945. The boss was home with the flu, then one of the pin setters. You know, they used boys for that job in those days. Well, he didn't show up, and Marion went in the back room and set pins all evening. It was a back-breaking job, and when the night ended, she went home with a splitting headache, backache, arm ache, leg ache. In fact, anything that could hurt was hurting. She slept 12 hours straight. The job of setting pins had been too much for her, and she was exhausted. She never tried doing that again, but she dreamed a strange dream of bowling balls hurtling down on her, spinning. The next day, she started reducing the speed of her ball and started emphasizing the spin. Her score climbed. Those 3 hours of setting pins changed her style and improved her game. It's something she would never have tried except for that miserable night of setting pins. Marion Ladwig went on to win the All-Star Championship and become the greatest female bowler in the world. She was named Bowler of the Year 10 times, and it was all possible because of a skill she developed by accident. This is Don Drysdale. It's no accident that your local Army recruiter has the best deal on jobs and training to be found anywhere. See him soon, and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. Some athletes take years to develop, others are quick to achieve success. Today, I'll tell you about a football player who didn't really make a name for himself until he quit playing. This program is brought to you as a public service of this station in cooperation with your local Army recruiter. Today's Army will guarantee you a service overseas in writing before you enlist. It's a great offer. Check it out with your local Army representative soon. Now, today's story. It's about the son of a shoemaker. This fine young man was lucky enough to be selected to attend Yale in the late 1800s. He was a fine athlete and a great football player. As a matter of fact, he was also a terrific baseball pitcher. But he wasn't interested in a career in sports. He wanted to be a minister. He felt that he could use what he had learned to good advantage in church work. But he was too good. He couldn't walk away from sports, and before long, he realized that he was better suited to coaching than he was to preaching, and so he decided to work for the Lord through athletics. He took the job as football coach at a tiny YMCA training school, but again, he was too well known to be allowed to fade away. As a college athlete, he was nationally known as one of the finest football stars in the country. He was in demand. So, when a new college started in Chicago in 1892, they asked him to be their football coach. He took the job, and football was never the same again. The first thing he concentrated on was training. He was America's first coach to realize that a strong, well-prepared athlete was a better football player than someone who tired as the game went on. He invented a tackling dummy to help his team drill. Then, to make it easier to tell who was who, he decided to put numbers on the players' uniforms. For some reason, no one had ever thought of doing that before. Then, as the years went by, he added one new idea to another. He dazzled opposing teams when he introduced a player in motion. It was a play that opposing coaches called illegal and unstoppable, but a player in motion is now a standard part of the game. The shouting about that idea was just quieting down when he came up with a new idea, the unbalanced line. It came as quite a shock to the University of Illinois when they lined up against Chicago one day, and the Chicagoans lined up with 2 men on one side of the center and 4 men on the other. Again, the opposing coach came out yelling, but the idea was here to stay. Yes, you never knew what to expect when your team came out to play against this man, but he was a long way from being done at revolutionizing the sport. And I'll tell you the rest of this unbelievable story in just a moment. First, here's something very believable from today's Army. Many songs have been written about being in Europe during spring. The only problem has been getting there. Well, today's Army needs young men and women to live and work in Europe. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. Sing your own song in Europe this spring. Join the people who've joined the Army. Now back to our story. It's about the greatest football coach that America has ever known, a man who single-handedly invented the tackling dummy, the unbalanced line, and a player in motion. He was also the first coach to use the spiral pass from center, the first to use multiple and fake ball handling, the first to use a fake place kick, and the first to organize intersectional football between 2 college football teams. By now, you must know who this man is, the only man in history to be named to the Football Hall of Fame as both a player and a coach. His name is Amos Alonzo Stagg, but the most amazing part of his story is still to come. You see, Mr. Stagg couldn't quit. He stayed at the University of Chicago for 41 years. When he got to be 70, the college got worried about his health and retired him. Well, that made him very angry, and he moved to California, where he became head coach for the College of the Pacific. At the age of 81, he was voted the best college football coach of the year. Amos Alonzo Stagg was 98 years old when he finally quit coaching. Like all great champions, he couldn't quit, and he set a record that will never be equaled, coaching continuously for 70 straight years. This is Don Drysdale, and you've got a job that's good for years with Army training. Find out about great career opportunities now available to young men and women and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone. This is Don Drysdale. When you study the history of sports, you find that a pattern emerges. Most athletic events start on a very small level, gradually build, win acceptance, and finally become popular. Well, today we'll talk about a very popular winter sport that was ignored for 1,300 years. This program is brought to you as a public service of this station on behalf of your local Army representative. Today's Army offers you a challenging opportunity with an interesting future. See your local Army recruiter soon. Now, today's story. It's about a sport that no one in America cared about until it became an overnight success. I'm talking about the sport of skiing. In Europe, skiing has been a popular pastime for 1,300 years. In this country, the only time that skiing enjoyed any popularity was with the Gold Hills of California in the mid-1800s. And when you stop to think about it, you can understand why. There was no American ski equipment made. There was no advertising, no lifts, no snow resorts. Americans thought of snow as a cold place to be while you're waiting for spring to arrive. The idea of having fun while sliding around on a pair of skinny boards seemed far removed. But little by little, the sport began to grow. Finally, it reached the place where there were actually hundreds of skiers in New York. Not thousands, just hundreds. Most of these people belonged to the Dartmouth Outing Club. It was the parent organization of the Dartmouth Winter Festival. But at least they were organized, and they sent a petition to the Boston and Maine railroads to run a skier special to the White Mountains of New Hampshire. Reluctantly, the railroad agreed to try it. On the first run to the slopes in 1931, only 61 skiers showed up. "Forget it," said the railroad. "We can't run a train for only 61 people." The Outing Club hung on. "Well, give us another chance," they pleaded, and the railroad agreed. The next Sunday, 94 skiers were on the train. 3 weeks later, the total was up to 150. By the end of the season, the amazed railroad was adding extra sections and carrying as many as 300 people into the snow country. That year, the Boston Evening Transcript began carrying a weekly column that told of snow and ski conditions in New England. It was called Old Man Winter, and it was the first time a newspaper in America had actually reported snow conditions to its readers. Now the rush was on. Department stores began stocking ski gear, and the following year, as many as 1,500 skiers were taking the trains to the snow country. But it took one major event to put skiing on a firm footing and establish it as a respectable sport. And I'll tell you what that was in just a moment. First, here's good news from today's Army. The Army travels on its stomach. Well, this saying is as true today as it was 200 years ago when our nation and the U.S. Army were just getting started. Today's Army needs cooks. Your job and assignment are guaranteed when you qualify. Help today's Army travel. Join the people who feed the Army. Now back to our story. It's about the way skiing got started in America and almost didn't get started at all. Nothing much happened with the sport until 1931, when a special train began taking skiers to the mountains from Boston and New York. When newspapers began printing ski information, more people became interested. But it wasn't until the Winter Olympics came to Lake Placid, New York in 1932 that skiing became respectable. After New Englanders saw how graceful and easy downhill skiing was, the craze was on. Hundreds of miles of ski trails were built. Ski tows and ski lifts were constructed. Winter resorts were opened up. The craze was on. It was bigger than the hula hoop. No sport in the history of the United States has ever grown so fast overnight. In less than 10 years, skiing went from a curiosity practiced by nuts to an all-accepted family pastime tried by millions. This is Don Drysdale. The United States Army hasn't grown up overnight. It's been around for a long, long time. Today's Army can teach you a job with a future, and if you want, it'll even station you in an area where you can go skiing if you like. See your recruiter for all the details and join the people who've joined the Army. Till next time, so long, everyone.